The heat outside had already begun its quiet war on the day, the kind that pressed itself against your chest and crawled behind your collar. Inside the diner, though, the air was stale in a different way, thick with the scent of fried oil, reheated bacon, and something older, like dust soaked into the walls from a time when kindness wasn't rationed. Maya Williams moved through it with practiced rhythm, balancing a tray with one hand, coffee pot with the other, ignoring the creaking in her knees and the dampness at the base of her spine. She didn't flinch when the man at booth 6 sneered loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You sure that waitress ain't from some jungle tribe?" The laughter that followed wasn't surprising. It never was. "Yeah, or maybe she fought a bear and lost," the second man chimed in. "Or maybe," said the third, tone syrupy with mockery, "that's just what happens when you're black and angry all the time." Maya heard every word. Her fingers clenched slightly around the tray, just enough to rattle the porcelain mugs against the steel rim. But her face didn't change. She didn't stop. She moved past them without a glance, posture straight, eyes fixed forward. Because this wasn't the first time someone had commented on the scar running down her right forearm, a brutal line of raised flesh that started at her elbow and dipped behind her wrist like a canyon carved by fire. Some said it looked like a whip wound. Others guessed animal attack. The truth was far worse and far more complicated. But Maya didn't explain any more. She hadn't for years. Her silence wasn't submission. It was armor. Armor forged in sand, blood, and gunpowder. Armor she wore every day. Near the end of the counter, a man in a worn hoodie and a faded ball cap paused mid-bite, the fork in his hand hovering just inches from his mouth. His eyes had locked on Maya's arm, the scar. He leaned forward slightly, his voice uncertain but low and filled with something Maya hadn't heard in a long time: recognition. "Lieutenant Williams?" She stopped, barely perceptible, just a hesitation in her stride. Then she turned her head slowly, cautious, not yet committing to acknowledgement. The man stood now, stepping away from the counter. "Corporal Reed," he said, eyes wide, throat tight. "Fallujah. Convoy fire. You pulled me out of the wreck." Maya's breath caught. Her body remembered before her mind did the smoke, the heat, the crushing metal, the dragging weight of a dying man under mortar fire. "Corporal Reed," she repeated, barely above a whisper. The room went silent. Even the fry sizzle seemed to pause. The same three men who had mocked her seconds ago now watched, confused. One cleared his throat, another pretended to check his phone, but none of them laughed again. Maya didn't move as Reed stepped closer. His face had aged heavier around the jaw, eyes a little sunken, but the way he stood, that was the same, shoulders squared. He offered his hand. Not in a performative way, in a soldier's way. A thank you, a salute. Maya looked at the hand, then took it. Briefly, firmly. She let go first. "I didn't think you'd remember," she said. "I remembered everything," Reed replied. "Your voice, when you told me to hold on. The way you crawled under that truck. The heat, the smell. And then I saw the scar." She nodded. There was nothing else to say. Not right then. She turned back to her tray and walked the rest of the way to the kitchen, the laughter behind her now replaced by silence, too thick to breathe through. In the break room, 10 minutes later, Maya stood at the sink, rinsing coffee grounds from a dented filter, trying to steady her hands. She hated how much they shook, how the memory still gripped her bones. She hated how seeing Reed had stirred things she buried years ago. But, most of all, she hated how the three men hadn't apologized. They wouldn't. People like that never did. She was reaching for a clean rag when a soft knock tapped against the door frame. Reed. She met his eyes and said nothing. He stepped in slowly, hands in pockets. "I didn't know," he said. "What happened after that? I left the service. Got out. You stayed." She nodded. "For a while." "And now?" he asked gently. "Now I make coffee," she said. Her voice wasn't bitter, just factual. "I work shifts, pay bills, sit in rooms where people laugh like I don't exist." He looked away. "I'm sorry about what they said." "Don't be," she replied. "They say worse online. At least this time it was to my face." He shook his head. "It shouldn't be like this." She looked at him carefully. "But it is." And then she softened, just a little. "You okay, Reed?" He gave a small smile. "Alive, thanks to you. I never got to say that." "You did," she said, "back then, when you lived." Before he left, he pulled something from his jacket, an old laminated photo. A grainy shot of 5 soldiers standing in the dust, laughing, arms around each other, faces dirty and alive. Maya and Reed were both there, younger, less guarded, before. "That convoy changed everything," he said. "I've carried this since." She took the photo in her hand, studied it. Then, without thinking, she flipped it over. On the back was scribbled, "The ones who pull others from the fire always get burned." Her throat tightened. She gave it back. "Keep it. You earned that." "No," he said. "You did." That night, the diner's assistant manager, Lawazi, asked Maya what had happened. "That guy, he stood up like you were royalty." "Not royalty," she said, "just someone who got out alive." He watched her carefully. "You don't talk about your time in the service." "No." "Why not?" She wiped down the counter with slow, deliberate motions. "Because people forget. People make jokes. They see the uniform in a movie, not in the burn units or the sleepless nights. They forget the cost." "Well," he said, "he didn't forget." "No," she agreed, "he didn't." And that meant something. Not everything, but something. Later, as she was leaving, Maya found an envelope tucked under the sugar dispenser at booth 6. Her name written in block letters. Inside was a note, short and sharp in its sincerity. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I should have. They were wrong. You deserve more than silence. L." She read it twice, folded it carefully, slipped it into her coat pocket and walked out into the night. The street was quiet, no wind, no laughter, just the slow hum of streetlights. And in that stillness, she allowed herself one breath, a long, steady inhale of something unfamiliar. Not victory, not peace, but recognition. She walked the 4 blocks home, past shuttered stores and flickering neon, and thought of Reed, of Fallujah, of the way his voice had cut through the noise, not loud, not angry, just certain. Lieutenant Williams? That was the first time she'd heard her rank spoken aloud in nearly a decade. And it didn't sound like a memory. It sounded like a mirror. One she hadn't dared look into for years. At home, Maya sat by the window, unzipped her coat, and pulled out a battered composition notebook. She hadn't written in it since she left the service. It still smelled faintly of smoke and sand. She opened to a blank page and wrote slowly. "Sometimes silence is a shield, but sometimes it's a cage." Today, someone remembered. Maybe that's how it breaks. She closed the book, placed it gently on the windowsill, and watched the city breathe in the distance. Not healed, not better, but awake. And, for now, that was enough. The scar on her arm hadn't always been quiet. It used to scream in her sleep, twitch beneath her skin every time a car backfired or a door slammed too hard. In the early months after discharge, Maya would wake drenched in sweat, fingers curled into fists, jaw locked as if her body refused to believe it had left the fire behind. But over time, like everything else, the pain settled into silence. The nerves dulled. The ache became memory. Only the scar remained a thick, dark river of healed chaos, silent, constant, misunderstood. People saw it and guessed wrong. A childhood accident, a burn, maybe a fight. No one ever thought of Fallujah. No one ever thought of war. Until Reed. It had been nearly 10 years since that day, but Maya remembered every breath. The convoy was moving through a narrow corridor outside Fallujah, surrounded by crumbling buildings and tension so thick it clung to the skin. Her team had been running recon for a supply drop that never made it. The sun was brutal, the air thick with dust, and something else, something heavier. They were one Humvee short when the IED went off. Maya didn't see it. She felt it. The shockwave bursting through her chest like a second heartbeat. The explosion tore through the third vehicle in the line, flipping it sideways like a toy. Flames erupted before the dust had even cleared, black smoke spiraling into the sky. Screams followed, then static, then silence. Lieutenant Maya Williams had been the first to react. Her boots hit the ground before anyone could order her to stay put. She moved without thinking, weapon drawn, eyes locked on the wreckage. Flames danced along twisted metal. Ammunition popped like firecrackers inside the vehicle's body. She could hear coughing. Someone was alive. She dropped her rifle and dove into the smoke. The heat wrapped around her like a vice, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. But then she saw him, Reed, trapped beneath the frame, blood soaking his uniform, eyes wide with panic. "I can't feel my legs," he gasped. "You don't need to," she answered, her voice calm in a way that surprised even her. "Just hold on." The extraction wasn't graceful. The metal was searing, and debris sliced into her arm as she pulled him free, but Maya didn't stop. She dragged him clear seconds before the secondary explosion erupted behind them, a wave of heat and light that knocked her sideways, sent shrapnel tearing through her sleeve, carving a path down her forearm. She didn't feel it then. Not until later. Not until the dust settled and the adrenaline wore off and she saw the blood pooling beneath her fingertips. But by then, Reed was safe. And that was enough. At least, it had to be. The commendation came quietly. A silver oak leaf, a certificate signed by a man she never met, and a handshake from a general who called her kid. She accepted them without ceremony, nodded at the praise, then packed her duffel and left the service 6 weeks later. It wasn't the injury that pushed her out. It was everything after. The way people looked at her like she should be grateful to have made it back. The way the VA made her wait 6 months for a basic appointment. The way her record was spotless, but her options were invisible. No one wanted to hire a former soldier with a scarred arm and eyes that didn't blink at violence. So she disappeared, slipped into the rhythm of survival, moved back to Johannesburg to care for her mother, and took the first job that didn't require explanations. The diner didn't ask about her past. They needed someone who showed up on time, didn't steal, and could carry a tray without spilling. Maya fit the bill. She worked double shifts, covered for no shows, and never asked for favors. The other staff liked her well enough, though no one got too close. She was kind, quiet, and precise, but not friendly, and never open. They joked about her arm sometimes, lightly, not cruelly, but Maya let the comments float past like smoke. She didn't explain, didn't correct. She simply poured coffee, cleared plates, and lived in the soft shadow of what she used to be. That changed the day Reed walked in. He didn't recognize her at first, not in the diner uniform, not with her hair tied back in a simple bun, not with her voice so quiet. But that scar spoke louder than words. The way his voice cracked when he said her name undid something in her, something she didn't even know she'd locked away. Lieutenant Williams, a title she hadn't heard in years, a name that belonged to someone braver, stronger, more whole. But when he said it, she remembered. She remembered being 27, standing in the center of chaos, her voice the only calm in a storm. She remembered what it felt like to be useful, to be trusted, to be seen. That night, after Reed left, Maya sat on the floor of her apartment, the city lights painting broken shapes across her walls. She pulled out the old box from under her bed, the one she hadn't opened in years. Inside was the uniform she'd kept, but never worn again. The badge, the patch with her name stitched into it, the journal with sand still stuck between the pages. She ran her fingers over the fabric, over the ink, over the past. Then she reached for her newer notebook, the one she had started again after Reed's visit. She flipped past the fresh pages and began to write. I pulled him out of the fire, but I left pieces of myself in the ashes. That's what no one tells you about being a hero. It doesn't come with a map home. The next day, Loazi handed her a printed sheet before her shift started. Some guy came in this morning and left this, said you'd know what it meant. It was a photocopy of a newspaper clipping, a local veteran fundraiser. And there, in the lower corner, was Reed standing with a group of other former soldiers, all in plain clothes, holding signs that said "Still here, still fighting." The caption below read, Corporal Reeds credits his survival to a woman he calls a ghost and a guardian. Maya stared at the paper, then at the door, then back at the paper. Loazi watched her. You okay? Yeah, she said, just remembering something I didn't know I'd forgotten. He nodded, not asking more. Maya folded the paper, tucked it into her apron, and picked up the first tray of the day. That afternoon, one of the younger waitresses, Thando, approached her cautiously. Is it true, she asked, that you were in the army? Maya paused. Yes. Did you really save someone in a war? Yes. And now you work here? Maya smiled gently. People work where they're needed. That never changes. Thando hesitated, then said, I think that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Maya didn't respond, just patted her on the shoulder and returned to wiping down the counter. That night, after closing, Maya stood outside the diner looking up at the sign. The letters flickered slightly, the S buzzing in protest. She thought about what Reed had said, what Thando had asked, what the scar still meant. She thought about the fire, the silence, the truth buried in shifts and sugar packets, and she wondered, just for a moment, if maybe it was time to stop hiding in plain sight. She pulled out her notebook, flipped to the second page, and wrote, A name spoken with respect is a kind of resurrection. I didn't expect to be remembered. I only hoped not to be erased. Then she closed it and walked into the night, the street quiet beneath her steps, her scar glowing faintly under the streetlight no longer just a mark of pain, but a map back to herself. Maya didn't find out the post had gone viral until 2 days after it happened. She'd just finished wiping down table 9 when Lawazi came in holding his phone out like it was radioactive. You might want to see this." She squinted at the screen, expecting a customer complaint or a glitch in the POS system. What she saw instead was a grainy photo her and Reed in the break room, mid-conversation, caught from the side. Above it, a caption in blocky white text. "The woman who saved my life in Fallujah now serves tables in Johannesburg. Still a hero, still silent." And below that, in smaller print, Reed's name and the hashtag #Lieutenant Maya. She blinked. Once, twice. Where did this come from? Lawazi scrolled down. Reed posted it. It's everywhere. Thousands of shares. Veterans commenting. News pages picking it up. He paused. People are calling you a national symbol. Maya didn't say anything. She just turned, walked into the kitchen, and stared at the stainless steel sink until her breath returned to normal. Her phone buzzed 3 times before she pulled it from her apron pocket. First was a message from an unknown number. "I served under you in '08. You saved my brother. Thank you." The second, "Is it true? You're her? I never knew." The third was from her mother, written in all caps. "Maya, you are on the internet. Please call me." By the end of the day, she'd received 12 missed calls, 4 interview requests, and 3 customers who came in just to meet her. One asked to take a selfie. Another cried. The third said she should run for office. Maya smiled politely, poured coffee, nodded her thanks, and kept moving. But inside, a slow unease began curling at the edges of her chest. This wasn't what she wanted. Reed's intentions had been good, maybe even pure, but the spotlight felt like heat without light, attention without understanding. She had spent years carving out peace in her anonymity. She didn't know how to be seen anymore without shrinking. That night, her doorbell rang. Standing there, holding a notebook and a press badge, was a young woman with short braids, bright eyes, and shoes too clean to have walked far. "Hi," she said. "I'm Lindiwe Nkosi. I write for The Citizen. I'm sorry to show up like this, but I've been trying to reach you." Maya hesitated. "Why?" "Because your story matters," Lindiwe said. "Because women like you don't get remembered unless someone insists on it." Maya opened the door a little wider. 5 minutes, she said. "No pictures." They sat in the kitchen, 2 mugs of rooibos between them, steam curling like ghosts from the past. "You were really a lieutenant?" Lindiwe asked. "Yes." "And you saved Corporal Reed?" "Yes." "Why did you leave?" Maya's eyes drifted to the window. "Because sometimes you give everything to something, and when it's done with you, it forgets to give you a way back." Lindiwe didn't write that down, but her pen didn't stop moving. "What do you want people to know?" she asked softly. Maya stirred her tea. "That the scar isn't the story. That I'm not brave because I fought. I'm brave because I stayed." The article published the next morning. The Waitress, the War, and the Weight of Silence. It didn't sensationalize, it didn't dramatize, it just told the truth about a woman who'd served, saved, survived, and disappeared. About what it meant to be quietly honorable in a world that rewards noise. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from across South Africa, then from the UK, then from American bases abroad. Some were from veterans, some from civilians, many from women who had served, who had survived assault, racism, dismissal, abandonment, women who had scars of their own. Maya read as many as she could before the sheer volume made it impossible. The diner, once a quiet place of routine, now buzzed with cameras, reporters, even a local politician who stopped by to shake the hand of a patriot. Maya gave the smile she'd learned to wear in the military, polite, contained, detached. But beneath the surface, the storm was growing. Not everyone liked the attention. A customer muttered, "Another one playing the veteran card." A server asked, half joking, "You going to wear medals to work now?" And one morning Maya arrived to find the scar on the break room mirror, a crude red line drawn in lipstick, mocking, angry. She wiped it clean with one swipe, said nothing, and clocked in. But the silence, once her armor, now began to feel like weight. It pressed against her ribs in the night. It whispered that maybe staying quiet meant surrendering the story to others, that maybe letting the world speak for her was just another kind of erasure. She called Reed. "You didn't ask," she said. "I know," he replied. "I just wanted people to know the truth." "You gave them a version of it," Maya said. "But you didn't give them me." He was silent for a moment, then he said, "Do you want it back?" She looked at the scar on her arm. "Yes," she said. A week later, Maya stood backstage at a veterans conference in Pretoria. The room beyond the curtain held nearly 200 people, soldiers, journalists, students, survivors. Reed had been invited to speak. He had insisted Maya take his place. She hadn't agreed until the night before. Now her name was on the program, her rank, her photo. And when the host announced her, Lieutenant Maya Williams, South African Defense Force, retired, the applause came not from curiosity, but from understanding. She stepped up to the podium slowly, her fingers brushing the edge like it might vanish if she moved too fast. "I was never the loudest voice," she began. "Even in uniform, I gave orders quietly. I gave comfort the same way. I thought maybe if I didn't speak, the world would stop asking questions I didn't want to answer." She paused. The room waited. But silence doesn't protect you. It just delays the moment you're forced to choose between invisibility and truth. So this is mine. She rolled up her sleeve and held out her arm. The scar gleamed under the lights. "This isn't shame. It's history. It's survival. It's something I earned, and no one else gets to define it." When she stepped down, the room stood. No chants, no cheers, just the weight of genuine reverence. Maya didn't cry, but later, alone in the hotel room, she sat by the window with her notebook and wrote, "I thought the fire ended when I left the battlefield, but it followed me here. Only now I understand I'm not burning, I'm carrying the light." Then she closed the book, exhaled slowly, and watched the storm begin to clear. Not behind her, but around her. Because this time, she had chosen to stand in it, and this time, the story was hers. Maya didn't plan to put the uniform back on. She had kept it, folded neatly in a vacuum-sealed bag, tucked beneath old journals and documents in a suitcase she hadn't opened in years. It wasn't sentimentality that made her keep it. It was respect. The uniform was sacred. It had seen fire, carried loss, and soaked in blood that never entirely belonged to her. It deserved silence. And yet, 3 days after the conference, after her speech had circled the internet and triggered another storm of public attention, she found herself kneeling on the floor of her apartment, pulling that suitcase out from under the bed. Her fingers hovered above the zipper for a long moment before she unsealed the past. The fabric was heavier than she remembered, not from dust or time, but from memory. She stood slowly, held it up against the light, and saw the name stitched above the breast pocket, Williams. Below it, the ribbons remained, faded slightly but defiant. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just stood there, quietly breathing it in, until her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Lindawi. The Minister for Veterans Affairs wants to meet. She says, no cameras, just tea. Maya stared at the message. Then, almost unconsciously, she began buttoning the uniform. They met in a modest office near Hillbrow, away from the press and ceremony. Minister Thabiso was an older woman, once a nurse during the Angolan conflict, now sharp-eyed and steady. She didn't ask Maya why she wore the uniform. She simply said, "You look like someone who's finally stepped back into herself." Then she poured tea. "You've become something of a symbol, Lieutenant," she said. "A quiet revolution in boots." Maya stirred her cup without answering. "But symbols are dangerous," Thabiso continued. "They make people feel seen, yes, but they also attract fire. And not everyone who salutes you wants you to stand taller." Maya nodded. "I've noticed." "And yet," Thabiso said, setting down her cup, "you came anyway." "I came," Maya replied, "because the silence wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who watched their story get rewritten or buried." The minister didn't respond for a long moment. Then she reached into her drawer and handed Maya a file. Inside were proposals, reform drafts, policy suggestions. "We've been trying to push this forward for years," Thabiso said, "but it needed a face, a voice, someone no one could dismiss, someone with a scar that scares them." Maya closed the folder slowly. "I didn't come here to be a banner." "You didn't," the minister said, "but that doesn't mean you aren't one." The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind. Maya attended town halls, met with lawmakers, sat on panels where men in pressed suits debated what she had already lived through. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she just showed up, but always she wore the uniform, not to claim authority, but to remind them what it had cost, what it still cost. Each appearance was followed by messages, some grateful, some vicious. She received threats, accusations, anonymous emails questioning her service. One man posted online that she had faked her scar using makeup. Another called her a disgrace to real soldiers. Maya read every word, and then she closed her laptop, rolled up her sleeve, and returned to work. The diner became a strange sanctuary again. Tourists came to snap photos, but the regulars stopped treating her like a story and returned to treating her like Maya. Thando became bolder, asking about deployments, training, why Maya always ordered lemon water instead of coffee. "Because bitterness lingers longer than heat," she answered once. The girl laughed like she understood, though Maya knew she didn't. Not yet. But one day she might. That was enough. Then, one night just after closing, a young man waited outside the diner. Tall, nervous, hands stuffed into jacket pockets. When Maya approached, he stepped forward. "Lieutenant Williams?" She paused. "I'm not active duty anymore." "I know," he said quickly. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "You saved my mother. In Iraq. She was with the medics. There was an ambush near Mosul, and you held the line until air support came. She told me that story every year on my birthday." Maya tilted her head. What was her name? Sergeant Odiambo. The name hit her like a memory pulled from deep water. Keisha? Yes, he said, eyes brightening. She passed last year, but she wanted you to know you were the reason she came home. Maya didn't reply, just nodded once, then hugged him without a word. It was the first time in years she let herself be seen like that, unguarded, human, unfinished. Later that week, Thabiso called again, this time with a proposal that stunned Maya into silence. We're establishing a national program for the reintegration of female veterans. Counseling, employment, placement, educational scholarships. We wanted to name it after you. Maya laughed, not out of mockery, but disbelief. Why me? Because you stayed quiet long enough for others to speak, and now, when you speak, people listen. I don't want to be worshipped, Maya said. Good, the minister replied. We don't need gods, we need truth. So the Maya Williams Initiative was born. Not with a parade or a press conference, but with a quiet email sent to the first group of applicants. Women who had served and been forgotten. Women with scars and stories. Maya met each of them personally, not as a hero, but as a witness. She sat with them in rooms that smelled of paint and promise, listened, took notes, built bridges out of shared silence. Sometimes, when words failed, she just rolled up her sleeve, and that was enough. One night, walking home, Maya paused by a bus stop where a young girl sat crying. No visible wounds, no blood, just the kind of grief that leaks through the cracks. Maya sat beside her, said nothing. After a moment, the girl glanced at the uniform. Are you a soldier? I was, Maya replied. Now I just help people carry things. Like what? The girl asked. Stories, Maya said. Pain, hope, whatever they don't want to hold alone. The girl sniffled, then whispered, Can I tell you mine? Maya nodded. I'm listening. And, just like that, the world made sense again, not in victory, but in the willingness to sit in the brokenness, to carry it forward, to offer quiet strength in a loud world. When Maya went home that night, she didn't write in her notebook. She didn't need to. The scar on her arm said enough.